happy. And Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for sparing your consultant, Mr. Solomon. It's really a treat for us here in Yak. We're the farthest away from the most western corner of the Federation. So, can we start? Can we start? I think we have people here. I'm sure others are joining in through this system, June.
Okay, from Pompey, we have here sitting next to me from the Department of Justice, Mr. Nakasone.
Thank you, Mrs. Makasani, for joining in. Thank you with me to advise. But I just want to inform and let the people who are tuning in this morning that we're live and you can participate from wherever you are. And so, yeah, just that we're live on this Zoom thing. So, yeah, feel free to come in. So let me open the public hearing this morning. We're having it at the Small Business Center Conference Room in Puanea. I want to thank all the participants, those in YAP and in the other states, and those joining in by Zooming in. And I want to also introduce the members of the committee who are here in YAP with us and joining us. First, let me start with Chairman Joseph Orozmal. He's a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and Chairman Berman is also a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and others who are joining in. I also welcome the Secretary of Finance, Mr. Secretary Amor, and again, my gratitude to you for sparing your staff. As I said earlier, it's a treat for us here in YAP. We don't usually see you guys. And I hope that you come and visit us more often. And there are in the audience, I see a lot of members of the general public, members of the state legislature, and some of our very prominent members of the community here in YAP. With that, and mostly the people who are present here are people from the private sector. So let me first start from my farthest left, the gentleman in the red shirt. That's Mr. Ram Solomon, who's the economic consultant to the FSM government and especially attached to the Department of Finance and Administration. And next to me, yeah, that's Rob, Mr. Solomon. Next to me is the staff attorney for the Ways and Means Committee. He has been with us for several years. Traveled all over, been practicing law in Bosnia, Europe, and Mongolia, and other places. He has a lot of experience, international experience. So let me turn over and the key witness for this evening, this morning is Mr. Solomon. And after he makes his presentation, then we'll allow for Q&A, question, and then other members feel free to ask questions, and also for the audience to raise any concern they may have regarding some of these global pandemic assistance available to us. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank our donor friends for stepping in to assist us. And we shouldn't overlook the fact that they too have problems, but they're willing to extend their help to the FSM. So with that, let me turn over the mic to Mr. Solomon.
Thank you, Chairman. My respects to you, to Chairman Urismal, Chairman Perman. Thank you, my boss, Secretary of Finance, for allowing me to visit both Chuk and Yap. It's always good to catch up, and being in person gives us a real opportunity to discuss through the programs with the people that it affects. My respects to legislature, traditional leaders, and others in the room here. I've got a short presentation. We thought we might be best to just put up some numbers on each of the programs so we can summarise where they're at. And as Chairman says, then we can go into a Q&A. And between the Secretary and myself, we will do our best to answer questions. So if we can just share our screen.
Can I just say a few words before you start, Rob?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, you may proceed.
Yeah, thank you. Just very quickly, I want to take this opportunity to extend my respect and my greetings to you, Chairman, Chairman Fikir, Chairman Rismal, Chairman Perman, honorable members of state legislature and state leadership, everyone that's here. I want to first express our very sincere gratitude to Congress for taking very timely action in appropriating funding for supporting the economic stimulus and the social programs that is currently underway. Obviously, this pandemic is something that countries around the world are really struggling with. And I think we took the really right choice of locking down and preserving the welfare of our citizens, the workers that come to the workplace to work. They're still healthy today. The economy is suffering, but the government is doing its best to provide relief efforts to both businesses, formal businesses, informal businesses, individual employees. And Rob will go into details of some of these programs that we're putting together as part of the response package. But I want to take this opportunity to really express our sincere thanks to FSM Congress for taking the timely action in appropriating initial funding for COVID-19 response that we're using up to today, along with what we've secured from our development partners. So thank you, and I will yield the floor back to Rob for his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Okay, if we just go to the slide, I'll just. These are not my slides.
Won't take it. Won't take it. It won't take it to program it. So can we just go like this, the manual way? So just yeah.
We're just having a bit of trouble getting it full screen, so we might just progress through here. And if you go to the first slide or the next slide, the first slide's around support to stranded citizens, the number of citizens that we've been able to pay out who are stranded overseas. This is a mixture of funding. It began with Congress, and we made 2 payments to most people, and there was a blend of Congress and ADP funding. You can see that there's over 748 applications were made for this program. There are a number that were declined. They were generally not eligible because they either departed after the lockdown just to visit family, so they took the risk themselves knowing they couldn't get back, or they had departed FSN back in 2018 or early 2019, and they were deemed to have actually migrated rather than being on being stranded overseas during a visit. Key things to note from this, I think, of that 700 odd applications, that when you work that out and you look at the number of people there, there's close to 2,000 people when you include spouses and children that are stranded overseas and are trying to get back. So when we do open up the borders slowly to start bringing people in, it's going to take a long time to get our own people back. And I think the business community needs to be aware of this, that there's a lot of people lined up to come in before we open the borders fully, but that will be a decision for the leadership. But I think people should realise how many people out there are trying to get home. We've made 2 payments. The first was last year, and in December this year, the President announced a second payment. You can see there's a difference in the amount of numbers paid. That's because there are people that left very late last year or early this year on medical treatment, so they've only received the first payment. They didn't get a second payment today. We've also, on the next slide, we can always come back to these later when we have questions. And we've also paid out 250 students who were studying overseas last year, and we paid them a one-off payment of $500. This was to cover the period of summer, where many of them were normally would have come home and they were stranded. So we, through Congress support, made a small cash transfer to each student. The third program we have running is our pandemic unemployment. This is our biggest program. As you can see, we've paid out almost $12 million. This is US CARES Act money. This is a new program for us. It was a very difficult one to set up. It's under a large number of rules and regulations. Secretary and I meet bi-weekly with the Department of Labour and discuss the issues and changes. The CARES Act is in its 3rd amendment now, It was amended in December in the last quarter of Trump's administration, and most recently Biden has amended the Act for a third time and extended this program out to September this year, so another 6 months. This is a very unusual grant. The good thing is it's new money coming into the country and it's helped retailers, it's put cash and consumption into the pockets of many people. But it's an unusual grant and has been difficult for the Secretary to administer because the grant is actually has no monetary value or no conditions applied. The grant simply says that the FSM will implement the US CARES Act as the CARES Act relates to us. So for the pandemic unemployment assistance, we actually operate under 3 sets of laws. We have the CARES Act and all the unemployment laws of the federal government of the US. Below that, we have a second tier where we get into detail of the law. We have to follow Hawaii's law, the FAST states, and Guam, CNMI, American Samoa. We all have to follow Hawaii's unemployment law. And then we have our own financial management regulations, etc. This is a heavily monitored and audited program. But we've managed to pay out 12 million to date, and we would anticipate a similar amount of that by the end of the year. So it will have turned out to be a $25 million program. When the Secretary first put the request in, we requested 40 million. That was on the basis of we wanted to have spare cash in this program. If there was an outbreak in any one of the states, and everybody lost their jobs or had to go home, then everybody would qualify for this assistance. So we had to have a backstop in here. So we have plenty of backstop sitting in the US Treasury. If something goes wrong, we have an unfortunate COVID case in any state, and people have to go home from their jobs and isolate for a month or whatever time if we go into lockdown. All those with jobs will qualify for this unemployment assistance. I think some of the issues around the unemployment benefit that we need to be aware of is we did not set the levels. The amount of money that is paid was set by the US in the US, and the same amount is paid out to the unemployed in RMI, FSM, and Palau. They set the base level as $166, and they gave us 2 grants out of the 6 grants in the unemployment program for the US. We're eligible for the 2, the TUA and what they call the FPUC, which is a bonus grant. And that's just an additional amount paid to everybody that's unemployed. But the amounts were not set by us, and we must administer according to the laws and the regulations that the Department of Labour provide to us. And as I said, as you can see, we've had a large number of applications, but to date we've only been able to approve half of those because it's not a normal unemployment program. It's related to COVID, and it's really for when a case hits. So those that are getting the unemployment are generally those that have been immediately impacted by the border closed down, not by economic hardship, the fact that businesses are going down, but it has to be linked directly to the borders. Or, for example, in the Apps case, there was a 2-week period, I'm not sure if it was 2, where there was a curfew. So where people couldn't work because of the curfew and lost income, they could qualify for the program. But otherwise, it's been very successful in that it's brought new money into the country and it's kept some retail alive, and we're very pleased it's been extended again to try and help people who are really suffering. The next program, because we have a number of non-citizen workers here, and they did not qualify for tour. Through the Tourism Mitigation Fund that Congress set up and finance are administering, it allowed for payments to non-citizens under that program, but they also have to be tourism related. So you can see that not all that applied were eligible, but we managed to support overseas workers who are stranded here through the program. And that's a locally funded program through Congress. Next, now here is the business, the tourism program. This was set up way back early, I think in April last year, by the foresight of Congress. You could see that with the border closure, immediately hotels and car rentals, tour operators were immediately impacted by the border closure. And we needed to move rapidly to try and support them, keep people in their jobs and keep businesses open. We all know this COVID-19 has gone on much longer than anybody anticipated. It's been a lot deeper and more harmful to the economy and the world economy than we had anticipated. So this has been a major initiative internally by Congress and the national government to try and support businesses. We're currently paying out 179 businesses across the country. In December, Congress amended the law to expand this program to include other businesses. To date, we have a very small take-up on that, and that's part of the reason the Secretary's asked me to go around the states and talk to businesses to make sure we can increase the number of businesses that are now going to benefit from this program. We have a stimulus package we pay out quarterly, and for some businesses we pay monthly if they really have significant cash flow problems. And then we pay interest on their bank loans to support them. So they, at the moment, we're just under 6 million paid out on that program. And I'm very keen to talk to business people throughout the country to help increase the number of applications here. I just have one or two more slides. The next slide, and this presentation obviously will be made available to Congress because it's still here, so it's public knowledge, so everybody can get a copy of this. At the moment, the Tourism Fund is managed by law by a Cabinet subcommittee. The Secretary of Finance chairs that committee. And with the expansion, they've made an initial list of eligible and ineligible or non-eligible businesses under the expansion of the program. This list, I'm hoping to work with the eligible businesses here, but this list is not a final and set hard list. The committee themselves has said they will always take applications from all and consider special cases. And if there is a business in one of those non-eligible columns but does have a special case that's COVID related or the lockdown related, they will consider, and we are happy to put those forward. To date, as I say, we've only had a take-up of about 10 to 15 businesses on the expanded program. So part of my tour is to talk to the business community and make them more aware of businesses that may be eligible, and talk to those that are on the borderline so we can present a case to the committee. The last program is the most recent program. This is the low-income household, and it's very much a topic of interest and a lot of questions, I know. This program came about last year when the Secretary of Finance and the President were discussing the fact that the COVID-19 was going on longer than anticipated, and there was more than just the tourism and business community being affected. There was a portion of the economy or of households that had no support at all. And so they approached, the Secretary of Finance approached the ADB to get a loan, grant of 14 million to provide some social support. And part of that 14 million is gone into the low-income household survey. That is going to pay out $1,000 to the 6,000 lowest income households in the country. So those generally that have no cash income will be the first that get paid out, and then we'll step it up after that. We've been undertaking a survey around the country, and so I've just put up a summary of the survey to date. You can see that both Chook and Yap response rates a bit lower, but that's purely because Chook and Yap have the outer islands. And in Yap here, I think the boat may have departed yesterday to do the visit around all the islands to drop off the surveys and pick them up on its way back. And Chook is also working at the moment on their lagoon and outer islands. So the status of that survey is we have a very good response rate to date, but we are aware of Chook and Yap's outer islands, and it would be important they come into the survey before we start paying out. They will generally be households that have no cash income, so most likely qualify. We are now working on getting all this info into the database and then doing some cross-checking. We will be producing lists of what we believe are the eligible households, and then we will be coming back to the leadership and the municipal governments and whatever traditional leaders want to verify the households that within their community that we have got the right ones on the list, and to check that we haven't missed anybody. And then I think it'll be 2 or 3 weeks of data entry, and then we'll be ready to start considering the first payment, maybe mid-May. But we have a good response rate today. It's just getting the information into the database. So that's my sort of summary. Secretary, maybe you have anything more to add, or some pieces I may have missed on each program that you would like to emphasize? I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rob. Well, I think you've covered pretty much everything. I just want to emphasize that the real purpose for this low-income program is really to address those in the informal sector that's also impacted by the pandemic, but not eligible under the PUA because of lack of documentation with their employment. Like, these are people that usually sell items to the hotels, restaurants, or whatnot, but there's no documentation that we can use in files such as business license, tax filing record to qualify them under the pandemic unemployment assistance. So that's really the intent of the low-income household program, to get out there and cover subsistence households that's really impacted but not eligible under existing programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Solomon. Now, we're open for questioning. Anybody, does anybody have any questions? Please feel free to take your last, first and last chance.
Yeah, I have a question. Low income, I have a question. What is low income?
Yeah, I think we all acknowledge that Interstate is a low-income country, and that probably just about everybody, if you look at a world definition or a wider definition, we would all qualify. In a perfect world, we would have 17 million, and then because there's 17,000 households, and we'd pay everybody out. But we are limited to the financing we have. So the reason we chose 6,000 households was based on the 2013-14 household income and expenditure survey. There was a poverty assessment done of that survey, and it determined that 40% of households in the FSM live below the poverty line. And that's around 6,000 households. So that's where the Secretary decided out of the 14 million that we had, we would allocate 6,000 to this program. Defining the actual threshold is a very difficult issue because the world has changed. The 2013-14 survey may not be so appropriate now because of the COVID. A lot of households have had a significant change due to COVID-19, and that's why the Secretary decided the best way was to update the survey and get some fresh information. There's a lot more people unemployed or are really struggling now than 2013-14. But the way we will go about paying out is first we'll start with all households that have zero income. And then we will look at average income per household member, because we have to remember that a household that has an income of, say, $5,000 and has 4 people may be struggling, but if there's a household with $5,000 income and 10 household members, they are really spreading the load and it's feeding more mouths. So we will be looking at the number of household members that income is feeding to determine the next layer of threshold. But the first layer will be to pay out those that are suffering because they have no income anymore. And then we will step that up to levels until we get to the 6,000 threshold of the funding we have. If we tried to determine it now and finance started paying out to some states, we could run out of money. And it's got to be an equitable program that all states benefit equally and evenly across the definition we come up with. So although that's probably frustrated Ponape and COSRI people a little bit because their questionnaires were all completed a lot earlier, it's important we get in a very solid base from all states. And as you could see, the survey completion rate is very high at the moment, and it really is just the outer islands of the average trip to come in, and then we'll have a solid database, and then we'll start the payment process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and joining in thanking Bob and the Secretary of Finance for this very important hearing of your committee. I have 2 questions. As a citizen of the resident of this area, everybody knows that a lot of our people depend their income on the selling of buildings. I know that documentation could be a problem, but we know that the local people, they sell their betel nut to other people who export. And if we are able to get the documentation, can these people be eligible for PUA?
I think that's sort of one of the grey areas that the Secretary has sort of mentioned, that we need to make sure those people are included in the low income. We have the exporters who qualify, as we saw before. The exporters qualify under the expanded program, so they will be part of the tourism mitigation fund, but that's businesses. And I understand, and we have had a number of applications from individuals who sell to the betel nut exporters, but it's very hard to verify, and we've been trying to work through. But that's the grey informal sector area that the Secretary is saying we need to make sure we help those people, because they don't qualify for tour or the tourism mitigation fund. So they're an important target of this program.
My second question, thank you very much for the briefing, is you mentioned a $14 million from the ADB, and then we are otherwise that is food security and stranded citizens and other stuff. And it's $6 million for low income, and then other expenses. Now it's 4.1 million. Is that the ballpark figure?
You're asking me to break down the 14 million from ADB. Is that the question?
No, just in general, tell us, yeah, you said 14 million, then you
Yeah.
mentioned there, just so that how people know. Some people have in the street are pressing this, getting papers from all these other states first come here. No more money than what we
I could give a quick brief on the overall COVID-19 programs to date, the funding, and I stand corrected by the Secretary if I get this wrong. To date, we've had around 30 million from donor sources for health expenditure for the 4 states to set up their quarantine, isolation, and other facilities for training, etc. in the health sector. The economic stimulus package was 15 million funded by Congress, and a small portion from the Asian Development Bank is assisting there. But 15 million for economic stimulus, so that's through the tourism fund, that's been funding non-citizen unemployment, and I think those programs. And then we got the 14 million. So around 30 million in health and 15 million for Congress plus 14 million from the ADB as the sort of overall programs at the moment. It's a sizable amount. Most of these are COVID related, or all of them are COVID related, sorry. So donors are expecting a very short turnaround of expenditure of funds, and that's one of the issues we have in terms of capacity to spend this. And as this is drawn out, the third one to attach to that as well is the 30 million we have for the unemployment program as well. So around 3 programs, around 30 million each. So it's getting up there close to 100 billion. From both Congress, a combination of Congress and donors since this COVID struck us back early last year. And under the CARES for the ARRP, I think it is the 3rd expansion of the CARES Act. We've got another 14 million coming from the US in the next couple of months on the I think that's mainly on the health side to expand health and education around the COVID-19. I think that might cover it, Secretary. Did I miss anything?
No, that's generally
Thank you very
all of
much.
it. Although those are the commitments and what's in the budget, but some of the support from the donors are still coming in, not yet with us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, Chairman. This is some of the food security and strength of citizens with money is expended for. Just briefly tell us that. Thank you.
Just for those in the audience that are not aware, the 14 million that we got from the ADP, it was broken down. We provided one economic package there, and that was 3 million to the development bank. So 3 million out of 14 has gone to the development bank for small and micro enterprises loans. These loans, the program's already set up. Development bank's underway. I hope they've been advertising and communicating to the business and community here. 50% of those loans to be to women in business or joint, women, husband and wife business activities. Small loans, I think, I'm not quite sure what the threshold, but the first and 2 or maybe 2 years is interest free, and then it's paid for by the government for the program on behalf of the individuals, as well as the loans through the development bank. We have a $2 million facility for food security, and the Department of Resources and Development back in Taipei is working on that with the state governments to disperse those programs. And then we have another $2 million grant, community COVID awareness grants. Those grants are available for community groups and organisations that wish to do COVID-19 preparedness and awareness in their communities. That's run through the Department of Health. For those in the room that are not aware of these programs, I will be here all afternoon in this room, as well as tomorrow morning and Monday. So I'll be available for anybody that wants to have a one-on-one or bring in their community group, a couple of people that we can discuss how you can get access to some of these other grants. They're doing the first review of the first set of grants today. And so we need to make sure, and there is an allocation across the state. So there is money set aside for that. So it can't be all used up at Taipei or one of the other states. So those programs are underway, and as well as a vulnerable group, there's $1 million set aside for disabled, those that have suffered from gender-based violence, and the elderly. And that program has some medical and some electricity subsidies for those households where we work with the utility here to provide $100 cash cards for selected vulnerable households.
Thank you very much.
I have one question. Our municipal got some phone for low income, I'm not sure, but the phone was low income household member, each household member. So we spread over the phone, each house, each. The very community, what is low? That's why I asked the question, usually. What is low income? Not even go to the chief and ask, what is for me of didn't answer my question. And the form, I believe, all over the island, they told me this form will be completed by Friday, the deadline last week. So I don't know, they told me some people asked, did you receive any form? Is low income?
I'm working with Gregory here, who's our focal point, and the state government here. We have, I think, they're telling me around 95% coverage of the main island here. We have forms from all the, and if you're concerned that we haven't received the form, we have them all with us so that we can verify that your group, we've received them. If we haven't, we can follow up where they are. That's part of the process of making sure we have 100% completion rate of this survey. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, and Gregory will be located in the statistics office. There is no deadline. The only deadline for the low-income household is the Secretary of Finance must have put out all the money to the households by the 30th of September. But as you can see, we have about an 84% bounce rate to date, so there's not much left to come in. So we're getting close to doing the data entry and screening and cleaning, comparisons of the data with Social Security database, the poor database, just to ensure that we have all the correct information. And yeah, but Gregory, who's our focal point here, is sitting up in the statistics office. He has all the forms up there. You can look at your village within the municipality, make sure the forms are there. And if people didn't fill out a form, a household hasn't completed one, they can complete one and drop it off with them.
Thanks, good morning. Thanks for the presentation, Solomon. It appeared to me, and it's clear that a lot of the assistance that are being facilitated throughout the country is coming from our bilateral partners like ADB and CARE program in the United States, and some from Congress. I'm just wondering, and this for us here in the Yap, it seems like we can see the light of day of when the so-called opening up of the economy will happen. So I'm wondering whether you, as the best economic advisor to the country, have certain advice for our leaders as to look at long-term opportunities. One that I can think of off the top of my head is probably the oldest task for the country is tax reform. And maybe we can look at some opportunity to do some case study or case testing with our tax reform. I mean, even now, I guess for the PUA packages, that some of the businesses are getting some tax break or getting paid. But consumers are assuming the basic tax, I guess. For you all that are looking at the right numbers, are making the right calls at the right time. I just want to see if the national leadership, especially the state leadership, are looking at long-term opportunities as opposed to these nice and powerful mandate programs that some of us are getting. They're not, I mean, they're accepting.
Thank you. There was a number of questions in there. I'll try and answer what I can, but some questions not for me. In terms of, we are very aware and we monitor the economy quite regularly back in finance. We are very concerned that 2020, the economy suffered, but we believe that 2021 may be even harder. I think it's very important that I think this country made the right decision. I'm an outsider. I very much believe the right decisions around the borders were made here. I think we needed time to get ourselves in a position where we're we're able to manage this thing and bring our people back. As I pointed out in one of the first slides, there's a large number of citizens who are stranded. So when the border opens, it's pretty much, I think, for the first 6 months, we'll be bringing back our people as a starting point before it's really widened up to the economic side. It's a very difficult thing to balance health against economics. Being an economist, I probably sit on the wrong side of that fence, but you know, the health is always more important first. I think the right decisions are made, and the opening of the economy should be at a pace that the health system can cope with. As far as reforms, I think right now, I think we have higher issues on the plate, on the table, and we need to make sure. But I think, in particular for the tourism industry will be a very difficult one to bring back, and it won't come back rapidly. It will be a slow, long process. And I think we need to start developing plans this year on how we support and market ourselves, because we will be competing heavily, more heavily than before, because we know international travel and tourism will be a lot more, not so much restricted, will be less than before. I think more people will travel internally or to shorter distance. Long haul travel and distance travel will be a long time coming back. So we really need to think about how we develop and get our economy moving forward again. But I'm not sure a reform program at this time, because reform programs always hurt in the first couple of years, because reform programs, tax reform and other reforms, are normally about a medium to long term gain, but generally have pain in the short term. And I think we've already got enough pain in the short term there at the moment. But I couch that with being my opinion as an economist and not representing the government in form.
Thank you. If I may just add, I think the one good economic advice that he did not mention is get the vaccine. Almost all the countries around the world that's been vaccinated, that's vaccinated, majority of their population have been able to reopen to economic commerce, and things seem to be doing well. So we will continue to encourage all citizens to get the vaccine so that we can open back up without worrying about putting too much stress on our healthcare sector. And if you look at the package, the economic stimulus that Congress passed through the public law, we think it's a very well-designed package, because most of the financial assistance that's given to businesses depends on how many people they retain on their payroll. That's the biggest financial item there. The rebate on the wages that they pay out to their employees. The more people business can retain, keep them working, keep paying for them, the more they get in stimulus from the government. So this is really to help the businesses retain our people on their payroll, keep hiring them, so that the impact, the social impact does not become too bad. We had anticipated the economy to start recovering at this point, but it's still contracting. Last year, in FY21, we saw about a 6% decline. We expect a further decline of 2% this year. Although there's a lot of funds being injected into the economy through the pandemic unemployment assistance, there's still not much economic recovery happening, but we've seen a large growth in the import tax. And it shows that our people are taking this money and sending it offshore to import something for their families, primary vehicles, and other goods. So we need to continue to think of ways to really inject some growth into the economy in the short term. Thank you.
I have one question for you, sir. Is that true that the border is going to be open on May 31? For all the state, four state?
No, as of now, we have not received any signal from Koshrai, Chuk, or Yap when will they likely open, but Pohnpei will be receiving its first flight from Guam on May 13, and that's looking very likely to go through at this stage.
If I may, to add on to that, we first of all, my utmost respect to all, Chairman Ficker, Chairman Sumal, and all the leaders of the Yap State. Good morning, Robson, Chairman Robson. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
And Secretary. The question was raised to the Pohnpei Task Force, especially the governor of Pohnpei State, that when you open it on May 3rd, is it only Pohnpeians or FSM citizen as a whole? So the answer was FSM, just for better information on everybody. So anybody that is actually was referred out by MyCare or went out for medical referral from FSM can come back to Pohnpei through the protocols or procedures of how we're gonna start having citizens coming back to FSM. Thank you.
Chairman, can I raise a question? And good morning to you all.
Good morning, Chairman. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, and for pardon my lateness to this hearing. I just found out a few minutes ago. But my question regarding to what the good chairman of Health mentioned in his statement, that the first batch will be for all the citizens of our the FSM citizens. My question is, what about the residents from the other states? If they go to Pohnpei and they're not allowed to go back to Chuk, Yap, and Kusrai, who would provide them with all their necessary needs in Pohnpei, or are they will be placed at the quarantine site for the rest of the duration of their stay in Pohnpei, or who would shoulder all the expenses
Okay.
if they're not allowed to go to the state, their respective states?
Secretary, may I, before you? Secretary is part of the FSM task force, so I think you can. But is there a reason why we don't do interstate traveling? I mean, look at Rob and Yancy. They're in Yap. They're able to travel from Pohnpei to Yap with no problem. So why should we have problem when they get clearance from Pohnpei? Everything is fine, so they can move back. They can go to Chuk or go to Yap. I know for a fact that what we're not doing is that having United drop off our citizens in each respectful state. United is not bringing the first batch here. If I'm not mistaken, it's the C-130 U.S. Coast Guard. So maybe what we're trying to do is to get comfortable with our repatriation. At least see where we are. So hopefully by the next repatriation will be United, because I'm pretty sure that one of the procedures on to come on United, you must get 72 hours tested before you board the plane, and of course you must be vaccinated.
Chairman, if I may follow some questions. Thank you very much, Chairman Perman. Yes, indeed, we have the interstate travel without any problem, but this would be a different from an interstate because they are coming in from an infected area. So it's not going to be like Rob and Yancy going to Yap from Bombay, because it's going to be coming from Guam to Bombay to Chuk to Yap and to Kusai. And we never know what's the task force from the respective states would allow if they still insist not to receive passengers coming from the infected areas. So that was my question. If they allow the other citizens from residents from other respective state to go on the first batch, little they found out that or find out that the task force from the respective state would not allow them to come to their state yet. So that's what that was my questions and concern.
Well, before I answer that, today's hearing is for Chairman Figure. This is, and I think
Thank
we're
you very
going.
much, Chairman. Can we go back to the main purpose of this?
Well, today's you can call me and I'll answer you. But today is all the stimulus that been inputted into our nation, and that's the reason why Rob is there. Thank you, Chairman Figure.
And perhaps I should might thank you and the state of Conway governor for that. But until we get to see some final decision forward, then we can start discussing those. But the interstate travel is something that is really up to the state task force and the governors of the state and the 4 states. I hope they can come up with some workable solution in the future. So let's go back to the main purpose. Senator, you have a question on the stimulus or
Yes, I respect all Chairman, Secretary. My question is regarding the household the income survey. Because that's not really understood well by all people, including me. I understand by the presentation that all those without any sources of income, like in the villages and outer islands, basically their subsistence, depending on subsistence economy. Then when I fill out some of these forms, there are maybe 3 people in the household with income varies with maybe including the list of those who are unemployed. How do you determine? This question was previously asked. What is your income? Do we have a standard like the 1,000 and below or the low income in our nation as a term? And how do you determine or calculate those who will be receiving the low income finance? Thank you.
Thank you. We started off, the Secretary asked me to look at the 2014 survey and the poverty report. And we had a look at that, and it has some low income figures. It has a poverty threshold. We worked that through, but then when we discussed with widened the group discussion, the issues around COVID-19 have impacted each state in different ways, and families and different businesses and different parts of the economy in different ways. So the reason for putting out the survey was to be able to update that 2014 poverty report, and the survey itself will help us define that baseline. If we used the older numbers, it didn't take into account the impact of COVID-19, and we were very concerned that we might not get all the people we really need to target. We definitely take into account, it's not a household income, it's the average income of a household members. So, as I said before, if there's 3 people in a household and there's a certain amount of income that spreads across the 3 people. If there's 10 people and the same income, then that becomes a lower, the average income for that household. So we really need to get the results in so that we can redetermine or update that 2014 numbers. We're very concerned that we start paying out and then run out of money because we've got the wrong threshold. So the key is to update the earlier work.
Chairman, can I ask our IT to please help with the audio? It's not clear. There's too much air. I barely understand anything that has been said.
Thank you, Rob. The reason I asked that question is for our people to understand that when they fill out that income survey, it's not that they will all be receiving, money for it. So it's better that they understand because filling out all these forms. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. We only got enough money to pay out 40% of the lowest, the poorest of the country. We would like to be able to extend that, but it's very much a function of the available finances. So around 40% of households will be paid out.
Any more follow-up question on that? If not, before we move on, let me just ask Mr. Solomon a question on the low income. Would it be possible or allowed to start from 0 income up until you run out of money?
Yes, that's exactly the intention of how we will do it. We will pay out those with households with no income. We're estimating that's around 4,000 of the 6,000 households. We'll start with the no income households, and then we'll step it up to the next layer until we hit our threshold of actually 6,000 households.
Yes, if I may add, yeah, I think, yes, that's the approach that we will be using. At this stage, it's hard to determine what is low income level for the Federated States of Micronesia. So the purpose for doing this survey is to get an updated estimate of what the situation is on the ground among our vulnerable households. The last assessment was done about 6 years ago, and it shows that 41% of our population were struggling with basic needs, and 10% were living below the poverty line. That's about $1.90 per day, with primarily in Pohnpei and in Chuk. But the intent of this survey is to get an updated information from the households in our communities, and we aim to start taking care of the lowest income households and moving up slowly until we run out of funds. But we will also continue to look for additional funds from our donors, hopefully from Congress, so that we can help as many as we can, especially during this pandemic. So yes, that's the approach that we will do. We will collate all the information and start assisting the households from the bottom and working our way slowly up. Thank you.
Any more follow-up on the low income? Now let's move to the next one. Anybody want to raise? And before we move on, I just wanted to say that the Gregory is sitting over there, his office now across the statistics office, across EPA and the hotel up to clarification. So if you have further questions, he's the person that.
Chairman, before we move on, I may ask for to raise a question.
Yes, Chairman, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and pardon me if this question may be already been asked earlier. I wish to raise to Secretary of Finance and other support staff in regards to this pandemic financial assistance to the states, communities, family households. So I want to know at least to give us data on at least percentage in each state, how much have been given out and how much have been given within these four states, Pohnpei, Chuquiap, and Kosrae. I want to raise that question to if they could give us any data on percentage, and I will follow up to a follow-up question with that when I know the data, or at least a percentage on the assistance had been given out.
Sorry, I didn't realize the secretary had stepped out. In terms of the low income, we have a rough estimate of the allocation that will go to each state based on the poverty survey back in 2014. We're just trying to update that to finalise that, but I think...
Rob, my question was specific. In terms of the assistance, the PUA that's been given out last year until today, how much has been given out and how much or what percentage each state have been given?
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. That was all in my earlier presentation. We actually went through each of the programs, stranded, tourism. So we can forward you the presentation so that you can see the numbers for each state and on each of the programs under the steering.
I barely hear what you're saying, but my question, I've heard that there are states that have a big percentage of this assistance and other states are very low. Let's say you've given out 10 million. 5 million was given in Pohnpei state. The other 5, it's divided within these other 3 states. Is there a reason that you can give us why it's been low in the other state? Is it manpower, or they're not filling out the right form or answering the right questions that you have experienced?
I think there's a number of reasons. It's around the structure of the economy of each state, the size of the number of people that are impacted. But we can send you the numbers. I mean, the Pohnpei state clearly had over 50% of the applicants, but less than 50% of those were even approved. Maybe if I send you the numbers and we can have a discussion on them. It's a bit hard to get into the detail now. There's a vast number of reasons. Pohnpei has the larger, not so much tourism industry, but consultants and others impact. And there are more hotel rooms, more restaurants, more car rentals, etc. So it's a bigger impact.
Rob, I barely understand any word you say. So can you help, World Secretary? Can you help? You have a clear audio. Can you help out what I just want to get good understanding of why other states are getting low turnout, whereas Pohnpei is getting a high percentage in getting this assistance. Is it because the applicants were not filling out the right questions, or is it you need more manpower in the other state to disseminate these requirements and assistance? You should understand since day one of these assistance that been given out, the problem now. It's more than a year. You should know why the other states are getting lower and more recheck on their applications than the other state. By now, you should know the problem.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Perhaps the IT person in YAP can also put up Rob's presentation. And I think that's what Rob was trying to explain earlier. What were the factors that affected the numbers that you were asking for, Mr. Chairman? And I have to apologize that Mr. Secretary just stepped out. He went to a task force meeting. So perhaps Rob can also assist on all of these questions. Thank you.
Okay, Chairman, can you see that slide now? That's the summary of the tour to date. And you can see, for example, in Chuk State, they had just under 600 applications and 353 approved. So that's over probably around 60% of those that applied were approved. You have a look at Pohnpei State, they had 1,300 applications and only 500 approved. So a little bit less than 40%. So the approval rate is higher. But the numbers reflect the size of the economy. The formal economy in Pohnpei is considerably larger than the other states and almost as large of the other 3 states combined. So it's a function of the size of the economy. And that's the formal economy rather than including the informal and the subsistence. Yeah, we'll email that shortly and distribute it to all Congress members and others that wish to receive it.
Thank you, Chairman. This is to Rob. I remember seeing a report, pandemic effect on our economy. And I wonder if there's going to be a follow-up or a recent one based on what has transpired in this pandemic assistance for the nation and for each of the states, so we can understand what's happening with our economy and if we are going to open, what we need to do onward. Thank you.
Yeah, part of I'm working on the 2021 economic and fiscal update now, and part of my trip here into Chuk is to observe and talk to business people and get to understand the current status here, so that when we put the next report out, we'll be able to do a little bit more on the state level. The first one I did last year was based on being stuck in Pohnpei, so I didn't really have a good understanding. This is going to help me provide a little bit more of an update on where the states are at as well. So hopefully that's probably going to take me 3 months. I'm pretty wrapped up in this household survey at the moment and getting these other funds moving. But
I am working on the latest update now.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Any follow-up question on Q1? If not, let me ask Rob my question. If I apply for benefits under the POA, and I understand it's a very complicated because we're implementing US law and US regulations. And as you said earlier, we follow the state of Hawaii law. Okay. Now, if my application is determined that I'm ineligible for the benefits, do I have a chance to appeal that decision?
Thank you. Firstly, let me say that it's been a long or a rapid learning experience with this program. So we did have delays earlier on. Now when people apply, we can turn them around in less than a month. There's two forms of appeal. Firstly, there's if someone is deemed ineligible, they can ask for a reconsideration if they've got some additional info they can provide. Those reconsiderations come to me and I assess the additional information and what was determined either by the state or the head office in Ponte, and I will reissue a determination. I think about 30% at the moment reconsiderations I've overturned, and I've included people into the program that weren't there. And then there's one final measure that an individual, they can take a second step, which is an appeal. We have an independent appeals referee who is not part of finance, who can hear an appeal from individuals. But to date, we've only had 2 that have gone that far, and they were both unsuccessful. But people must, if they feel, and circumstances change over time too. Remember, as the process goes, an individual fills out a form, and the form has about 10 weeks on it. They can be issued a notice of ineligibility, but if their circumstances change and there is something happens that they feel they now are eligible in later weeks or later months, they can reapply, because the determination, this program and the Department of Labor are very strong on this. You assess each week individually and you decide whether that week is eligible or not. You don't look at a group of weeks and say, oh, you're ineligible for 6, but you're eligible 4, but I'm going to give you a say no because the majority. It's a week by week basis. So at any time, anybody can come back and submit a new form and say, things have changed, I've been affected now in a different way from before. I want you to now assess where I'm at now. It's a week by week program.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. This is to Secretary. We have received the COVID Acts in the state, and we're not certain as to how, what the funding, how the program is going to be implemented as far as drawdown of funds without getting into our general fund. Can you explain how this can help our state to proceed with activities related to the COVID Act funding? Our concern is tapping into our general fund without appropriation. Please help on that. Thank you.
Which fund source is that, Rob? Can you relay? I was not hearing clearly.
Talking about mainly the health expenditure and the reimbursement process. It's very difficult cash flow wise for the states. And so when they spend money, which would be the same if we were trying to cash flow them, they're spending, in some cases, money that's not appropriated. So they're having to spend money and they're relying on 100% reimbursement to ensure they don't get caught out. And I think the speed and process, which is something that was brought up in Shook as well, the health programs that are based on reimbursables are really making the states struggle cash-wise, and they're looking for ways to try and make that more efficient and effective.
Yes, thank you. Look, if I think the process is the same, if you're struggling with cash flow, feel free to give us the invoices directly, and we will pay out directly from our finance field office there, directly to the vendors. That would be our best option if cash flow is an issue. We continue to work with the Hawaii on the CARES Act and see if part of that can be advanced. And I believe they've sent a communication on some portions, some certain expenses that they can advance, but I need to double check with the Department of Health. They are the grantee there that's really taking the lead on the health expenditure side. But thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I just have one more question on the PUA. The backlogs applications. Suppose the fund runs out. What's going to happen? And is there a time, a date that all this funding from the US under the CARES Act have to stop?
Under the pandemic unemployment assistance, the fund doesn't run out. The fund is there until all people get their due and payables. So if we do have some applicants that we're still trying to work through on the backlog, and part of my visit both here and the trip is to just work through the backlog on the unemployment. But it is a retrospective program, and the funds are secure in the US Treasury, and it cannot run out on anybody until they've paid their full due amount.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's very unlikely that we will run out. We secure, I think our initial budget that was approved is about 36 million. We've only paid out slightly over 10 million because obviously the virus is not here yet. There's no lockdown, imposed lockdown by the government on the businesses. So we feel that there is more than enough in the US Treasury waiting for us to slowly draw down as we need it. So we hope we will never face a situation where it runs out, but we're still trying our best to process the backlog. At the same time, we have an investigation unit within the PUA office that's auditing those that have already received some of their payments, and there are issues that we are finding, and people have already started returning some of what we paid out because we found that they lied on their forms, not eligible. So this is ongoing already.
Thank you, Secretary, for that. And that's one of my supposedly next question, whether there's any suspicious activities, and I think it's against the law. I think people should know that we should be grateful to whoever is helping us and not try to cheat the system. Okay, I guess I have a few more questions, but I'd like to give the chance to the members of the community to ask their questions, because I can always call and find what I need to know from the secretary or the Rob. So, just one question on PA and we can move on. I understand the first batch of assistants that came was at a different rate than what is expected after the second. Is a little bit lower or higher? I just, can we clarify that? Clarify.
Yes, the secretary first signed up to the CARES Act, the two programs we qualify a tour, that is $166 a week. That started back in late February, early March, and that goes all the way to September this year. So from February last year, that number hasn't changed. There's a special program called the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation that was added to the tour. That was for a period around April to July last year. It was an additional $600 a week. That stopped when they amended the CARES Act in December last year. They reinstated the FPUC at $300 a week as a top up on top of the 166. That 300 has been extended all the way out to September this year. So the current, for someone that's been separated, has no income, no job, and is on the tour, they get $466 a week.
Okay, any more question on the tour? We have two more topic areas that we need to cover. If not, I'm sure you all have understood. So let's go to the tourism sector mitigation fund. Yeah, maybe Raul, if you can expand on this, where people, businesses can obtain applications, how long it takes to review applications before the decision is made, there is work, and so forth. And again, if my application is rejected, you have a chance to appeal based on the circumstances.
From my presentation, there was a list. The second last slide had the committee's initial decision on eligible and non-eligible businesses. Eligible businesses will be processed automatically. While I'm here, I'm going to work with the Chamber and the Small Business Development Centre to make sure we identify all those eligible ones so they have an opportunity and they get an application as soon as possible. For those, as I said, on the grey area, or they're not listed in either of those on the list of eligible or non-eligible, we collect as much info as we can from those businesses so that we can present a case to the committee on their behalf. And then the committee makes a ruling on that. Unless a business feels they didn't have all the info, we didn't have all the info, or their circumstances have changed. If that's the case, we can resubmit, but generally there's only one round for that. With the committee, they make the decision. There's no appeals authority for that one at the moment.
Thank you. Question? Secretary?
Thank you. I know there was a complaint about some people not applying, but they cut the assistance. Some people apply, they didn't. I just like to clarify that when Congress first passed the law, it was very clear what types of businesses are eligible under the program. Hotel, restaurants, dive shops, tour operators, car rentals, primarily the tourism sector. So what we did not wait for businesses to apply. As these businesses are filing their GRT, their gross revenue tax returns on a quarterly basis, we're taking their GRT tax files, compare it against the same period last year, and if we see a major decline in their business activity, then there is already a set calculation for how much they will receive in economic stimulus. That's 100% of wages and salaries they pay for their employees, 100% of tax rebate, utilities, social security taxes. So we're automatically getting their tax return, making the calculation on how much each business will get, and we're sending it out to the businesses. But now that Congress has already expanded to program outside of the tourism sector to include other businesses that can demonstrate that they're impacted, then we are giving out application forms for all other businesses to apply. So I think what I want to do here is just to clarify why businesses were receiving it without putting in an application at the initial stage. And that's mainly because the law was already clear on which businesses were eligible and what they would receive. Thank you.
Secretary, any question on the delegation? Just one question, Secretary, or to Rob, on how long will this program last? Is the funding still available?
By law, the tourism fund is available until September 2021. And that will be the last quarter where we'll be able to pay out. But if this economic downturn continues, it will be up to the executive and Congress to decide whether, well, for the executive to either request an extension or Congress to take the lead on that if we see necessary to expand the program longer.
Any more questions on tourism sector education fund system? No, go on to any other would pretty much exhausted our list. Now, yeah, now it's your last chance to ask any question. Because most of these things, that questions that comes to us, they're mainly implementation and administrative, at which we, at least for the affiliation or members of Congress, we don't get involved in implementation. So maybe Rob can let you know where, if you have any questions, what office we have, national, state, that you may be assisted at. We know that low cost is with the statistics, the PUA, I'm not sure where to go. The mitigation, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Gregory on the low income will be based in statistics. We have a tour office upstairs at the YCA office next door to the Treasury Field office. In terms of So we're working with Small Business Centre to hopefully be the focal point for you on the business, the tourism support. We need to set up a focal point here because we don't have any national representative running that. So there'll be some of the discussions we'll have over the next few days. But as I said, I will be in this room for the rest of the day, tomorrow morning and all day Monday for any queries, further queries, questions, or one-on-ones with people on specific programs. And I'll have staff with me as well. Thanks.
Any follow-up questions, comments, complaints? Just one question to Mr. Secretary Arao. Has any of our 4 states stepped forward to assist in this economic downfall?
Can you please repeat the question?
Okay, let me ask a question closer to home. Has the government step in and say, we'll take care of some of our people? We know that you at the national government have almost exhausted all your resources. Here we are.
Thank you. I think we will certainly welcome support from the state governments, especially with the human resources. That's the implementation has been quite difficult because there's a lot of programs, relief programs happening, but we're quite stretched with the number of staff that's available to help. Even office space, we were looking around in Yap for where Gregory could sit and really nowhere from the state government. So we had to settle for the statistics office. But in terms of the implementation, there's a lot of enthusiasm from the state government on helping with implementation, administration of these programs. Although they also bring forward requests for implementation funds, and unfortunately, there's not, even at the national level, we're not paying for, we're not using anything for administration other than the temporary staff that are being picked up. Many of them actually are contracted directly with ADB, because the grants that we're getting is really not for implementation, but supposed to go all the way down to the intended beneficiaries, which are the low-income households, affected employees, and all of this. So we will continue to welcome support from the state governments. Primarily office space would be excellent, staffing to help with distribution of applications, collection and forwarding to us. That will be really helpful as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Any more questions? Comments? Been a long 2 hours. Okay.
I have one question. All this discussion and all the meeting we have today, a couple hours, did the people in Yap State, all the people in this meeting? I don't see any media or anybody else here.
Yeah, it's live. It's also on YouTube, and we announced that the beginning of the. You can go back and log in on YouTube and see what transpired the last 2 hours. So I think if there are no more questions, I'm pretty sure you are all aware of what's going on. That our phone will not be ringing 2 months from today on. And I won't be able to sleep at night and not be able to answer the phone early in the morning. So well, with that, I like to thank the main witnesses, the Secretary of Finance and Rob Solomon, and those members of Congress, especially the members of the committee, have taken the busy schedule to join in. I hope that we all work together in disseminating information. That's the best we can do without with it. But as I said, we're not well versed in the implementation of this program. When people ask us for information, we always say we'll find out and get back to you. So with that, I also want to thank those who are tuning in from abroad, from the other 4 states and all over, for listening to us. And I hope that we have not disappointed any of our friends, donor friends. We're trying our best, and we continue to welcome any assistance from them. And likewise, if there's anything we can do to help them sometime in the future, we'll gladly do that. We are friends, and that's what friends are for. So I just also, we're in a global pandemic, but I also just want to mention one very important thing that is happening in the world today, and that is it has to do, food security was mentioned earlier, and I just want to say there's a bigger problem creeping upon us globally, and that is the climate change. Think about that. Earlier, somebody mentioned about the tax reform. I must apologize that I overlooked that item, topic, subject to include in the public hearing today, but after thinking about it, I want to delay discussion on it, deal with the most urgent matter facing the nation and the entire world. So I did not mention, but somebody in the audience did mention, and it's one, I believe it's one of the permanent member politicians. And just going briefly into the history of the tax reform, it's well discussed matter throughout the nation. We've had consultants come in from abroad and trying to help us. And then we, at the National Congress, the previous Congress, the states, we had a conference in Koshrai, and they promised us, you take the lead and we'll follow. We did. The state, none of the states followed the lead in passing a law that should have been passed by the states, 4 states first, and followed by the national government. So I want to encourage the leaders of the state to not forget about tax reform. But it's something that I hope the next Congress and administration and all the states get together after the pandemic is over. We can continue to actively discuss the issue. It's an important one, and the country needs it. So, having said that, I want to thank everybody for your participation this morning. Before you go, there's some water outside. It may not be enough that you can share with your friends. Right? First. So I again want to thank everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mark Solomon, Secretary, and those who are listening. Thank you very much, and hearing is now come to a close.